All right, it's talk time now. The delay in the implementation of the recommendation of the 2014 National Conference has continued to generate controversy, especially its relevance to the present-day realities.
Now, springing from renewed militancy in the Niger Delta to the struggle by the indigenous people of Biafra for a sovereign state, insurgency in the northeast, and most recently attacks by nomadic herdsmen in different communities, there have been calls for a restructuring and a new Nigeria.
Now, these agitations have drawn attention to the 2014 National Conference report, which sought to address some of these issues. Now, we certainly know that when it comes to the call for national conference, when it comes to the call for restructuring, there are so many areas that some people feel it's a no-go area. And that is what is one thing that generally has generated a lot of controversy. But
isn't that where the challenge is? Some are already saying that maybe we should begin to look at the whole idea of restructuring like the Brexit. Leave or stay. Not necessarily that Nigeria should disintegrate, but is it something we should look at? How do we live together as a nation, as a people?
Well, the concept of the unity of Nigeria is another thing, absolutely non-negotiable. That
which the president himself has said.
Elders have talked about.
And we do agree with that.
All right, we'll certainly give you a news update, and then we still go ahead on the program. Stay with us now. All right, thanks for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. You've got some tidbits on the news there, on some of the highlights of what's going on across the country. Now, we've been talking about, we're laying foundation on revisiting the restructuring of Nigeria. The word restructure has come up among discussants recently, among stakeholders recently, among Nigerians recently, calling for different things, especially when you take a look at what's going on across the country, different agitations. And these agitations have drawn attention to the 2014 National Conference report, which sought to address some of these issues. Now, we are joined now by the chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee on the 2014 National Conference, Senator Dr. Femi Okuronnmu. It's good to have you in the studio.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
You're welcome.
Good to have you, sir.
Now, let us go back to understanding. Now, let us also tell you that Senator Okuronnmu is an accomplished engineer. He's not just a doctor; he's an engineer. He was a former commissioner for works, finance, economic planning, trade and cooperatives between 1979 and 1983.
He was also in the Senate between 1999 to 2003. And so you know that there's no better person to actually discuss this with us than the person of Senator Femi Okuronnmu. Welcome once again.
Thank you very much.
Now, most everyone really seems to agree that Nigeria needs to be restructured. But why do you think successive governments have shied away from, tackling this challenge that seems to be in the way of Nigeria's progress so far?
I will start with a phrase that I caught you saying just before I came to the stage, which is that Nigeria's unity is not negotiable.
Okay.
I think I caught you saying that.
From what people are saying.
That is a very, very false statement.
Okay.
It is wrong to say that Nigeria's unity is not negotiable. Any unity, when you have so many different ethnic nationalities wanting to live together as a nation, you cannot say Nigeria's unity is not negotiable. And it is interesting, if we look at those who say that, it is when they are in power that they say it. When all the power is in their hands, then they say Nigeria's unity is not negotiable. But when the power is not in their hands, they want to scatter the whole thing. So therefore, the first thing we must all understand is that Nigerian unity is negotiable and must be negotiated to the satisfaction of all of us, all the ethnic nationalities.
So what you're saying is that the whole debate about restructuring somehow has been politicized.
It has always been politicized.
Okay.
It has always been politicized. Now, coming back to why it has been so difficult to achieve this restructuring, it has been so difficult because since Nigeria's independence, a section of the country has monopolized the power almost, not completely, but almost completely monopolized the power. And because it is this section that has been monopolizing the power that always says Nigeria's unity is not negotiable. But every time the power wants to slip away from their hands, now they're ready to negotiate or to scatter Nigeria. And we shouldn't always buy that simplistic statement that Nigeria's unity is not negotiable. The constitution we operate now was put together substantially by successive military rulers. The latest one, the 1999 constitution, was more or less the work of Abacha, arising from the 1995 Constitutional Conference. And if we look at how the evolution of this constitution, it evolved through giving more and more powers to the north and less to the south, increasing the advantages of the north over the south. So now we are in a situation where the north has a permanent advantage by the constitution over the south. So with that, some people don't want anything that will change that. They want to have that status quo frozen permanently so they can always enjoy this advantage. So those who are disadvantaged naturally want something that will be more equitable, that will be more fair, that will be more just. And that's why there is so much dichotomy about whether you want restructuring or you don't want restructuring. The people who are benefiting from the status quo don't want restructuring. Those who are suffering from it, those who are handicapped by it, those who are underprivileged through this the status quo, they want restructuring. And in fact, restructuring was one of the cries of NADECO after the annulment of the Abiola election after June 12, 1993. The whole NADECO struggle was over restructuring to ensure fairness and justice, so that somebody cannot just say, oh, a man has won election, he cannot be president, I annul his election.
Okay, let's get into the word restructuring has always surfaced. Let's get into this restructuring issue.
Yes.
Where the call from different places, okay, let us restructure. No, what are these areas to be structured and restructured in the first place? Well, let's have those areas.
First, there is too much concentration of power at the federal government, at the center.
Okay.
In fact, that is why there is always a lot of acrimony over people wanting to be president, and why every section, every ethnic group wants his man to be president, because all the powers of Nigeria are virtually concentrated at the center. If you are the president, you are the god of Nigeria. You can do and undo. If you are the president of Nigeria today, you can decide to make all your tribesmen put them all in office and remove every other person, as President Buhari seems to be doing now. So, because there is so much power there. So restructuring for means decentralizing. That's one of the things, one of the most important components of restructuring. Giving more powers to the federating units, so that each of the federating units can operate substantially, almost autonomously, without being crushed by the powers of the center. And if you remember, when we got independence from Britain in 1960, that was what we had. We had 3 regions when we got independence: the northern region, the eastern region, the western region. Each of these regions was more or less autonomous. Each of them had its own constitution. Each of them was more or less managing its own area and giving resources to the center, so to manage those things that has to be managed collectively by the center. There was no problem. If you are not the president, I think you are not held back by not being president. Your area is not disadvantaged. So you can still develop your area. The most prosperous time of the western region, the time when the West has had the greatest development was when we had our own more or less autonomy in the western region. We were never in power at the center. We didn't share it in the federal government, but we control our own regional government, and with that regional government, we were always the first in Africa, first in implementing free education, first in having television, first in everything. And our people were very, very hardworking. Everybody was always striving to achieve. And because we were always trying to achieve and be the first, we were a model for other parts of the country to emulate and try to follow.
Indeed, and so it seems to be...
It promoted competition.
Absolutely.
That's where I'm going.
Okay.
So there was healthy competition, healthy rivalry. But the system we have now does not encourage anybody to want to do anything, because we are all now just going with the begging bowls to the center to ask for money from the federal government. And the federal government can decide, I don't like your face, or I will not appoint your people to office.
Now, let's look at this even further. The
Yes.
VP, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, some have come down hard on him, or quoting him, saying that the issue of Nigeria is not necessarily restructuring, but diversification. What's your take on that?
I'm sure
Diversification is what will really solve Nigeria's
Osinbajo is now, people turn around when they're in positions of power. That is the problem of the Yoruba man.
Sorry, Senator
but to be
Okuronnmu.
fair to
Now,
him,
he has said, look, if we talk about restructuring and we don't tackle the real challenges of corruption, lack of patriotism and all of that, restructuring will not even make much difference.
It will. In fact, this corruption is dooming because we don't have restructuring. A lot of the problems is because we don't have restructuring. If we have proper restructuring, most of the 80% of the problems will solve themselves, will disappear. And Osinbajo himself is one of those who have been advocating for restructuring throughout his whole life. So it is not just because he wants to please his boss. He wants to please his master. That's why I say it's a problem of Yoruba people.
Actually, he came out to say that actually that was not exactly how he put it. He was being quoted out of context. But we also like to understand the issue of because we're still on the issue of restructuring.
Yes.
You talked about decentralization, which is something apart. One other issue that many Nigerians were looking forward to and thought it was going to be implemented one way or the other is the issue of state creation. How viable are those? Because there were recommendations about 18 states to be created by the National Constitutional Conference.
The state creation issue is one that has to be approached from a holistic dimension.
Okay.
Now, as it is, even the 36 states we have are too many. I'm one of those who believe the 36 states we have are too many. The way the states are operated now, that is the way we run the states now, each state is almost a duplication of the federal government, with a governor, with commissioners, executive council, parastatals, everything. So the bureaucracy is too large. So as we have those states now, they drain on the resources of the nation. So ideally, what we wanted, and what quite a number of us have been advocating for restructuring. Ideally, what we wanted from the conference was to make the 6 geopolitical zones the federating regions of the country. so that we go back to a regional system where we will now have 6 regions. But unfortunately, while that is good from an economic point of view, from the political point of view, it was not found acceptable by sections of the country. But there are sections of the country who are still fighting for internal freedom, internal liberation. See, I as a Yoruba man, I live within my area. I don't feel anybody is colonizing me within the Western region. I feel free to go from any part of the West to another part. I don't feel like a second-class citizen. But there are many people in this parts of this country who, if we go back to the zonal system, will feel like slaves within their zones. Because within their zones, they are second-class citizens.
So how do you now solve
that
particular
to explain to you
problem?
why we now came to creation of more states. You have to understand our reasoning. See, if you go back to 6 zones and you say the Northwest is now a region, the North is a region, so many minorities within those regions will feel very bitter. Because in fact, the state creation gives them a measure of freedom from those they consider their oppressors, so that they can now more or less manage their own affairs. If anything, many of them are still feeling that they don't have that freedom enough, because they still have regions, parts of the states where they are feeling like second-class citizens, where they are not quite free. And they even want more states created for them, so that each of these minority groups can more or less have its own autonomy.
And some sense of belonging.
Yeah, and the sense of belonging. That is how the idea of creation of more states came. And so we agree that if people are crying for freedom, look, in the world of today, freedom, self-determination, these are forces recognized internationally, even by the United Nations. When people are fighting for self-determination, when they want internal autonomy and so on, you cannot ignore their cries, because nobody wants to be a slave within his own country. So that is how the idea of more states came. But then again, we took decisions which will have countered it, because when you have these states, if you make the states the federating units, now we make provision for states who want to come together.
Merge.
To merge.
Okay.
We make provision for it. For instance, if this West wants to come together as a region, we make provision for it, provided that by referendum, all the people in each of the states that wants to merge agree by 75% majority.
Does that not, sorry, I'll allow you to do that, because I mean, this is very interesting.
Yes.
Now, this issue, is that not why those who oppose restructuring have their fears that this may just end up balkanizing Nigeria and not necessarily, keeping Nigeria one, which seems to be a project.
It doesn't balkanize as long as we still have one government at the center. As long as we don't have to get a passport to go from Nigeria, any part of Nigeria to another, there's no balkanization. We can have autonomy. Scotland, look, in the United Kingdom, we all grew up knowing United Kingdom. That is the country that colonized almost the whole world. Today, their own parliament. Northern Ireland has its own parliament. These are all parts of the United Kingdom. So when people are crying for internal self-determination, that doesn't balkanize.
Okay, let's play you a report of the Vice President when he featured on our program Journalist Hangout recently. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, spoke about several things, including the issue of state creation. Let's hear him on this.
The whole idea of restructuring Nigeria is a major concept. It's a huge thing. There are many issues surrounding it. For example, I have always been a strong believer in fiscal federalism. That is to say that the states must have more resources. I was part of the Supreme. I actually went to the Supreme Court as Attorney General of Lagos State, no less than 10 times on issues of fiscal federalism. As a matter of fact, one of the things we said when at that point was that we were trying to restructure Nigeria's federalism by court action. We went to court several times on issues, for example, on the issue of whether states have a right to certain degrees of autonomy. We fully supported that and said the states have a right to autonomy with respect even to their resources. VAT, for example, the VAT, we believe, must be a state matter. Sales tax ought to be a state matter. I strongly believe in that, and we've always fought for those issues. State police, I strongly believe that we must have state police. Dividing Nigeria, going back to the region, and all of those kinds of things, I do not believe that at all. I don't think that we need to go back to region.
Okay.
You heard the Vice President
Yes,
there.
I've heard
He's
it.
saying the issue of going back to the regions may not necessarily be, well, he doesn't agree with that, but he agrees with fiscal federalism, where states actually have a large, autonomy to a very large extent.
The autonomy is easier to manage if you have larger units. For instance, if you have a village of 100 people and say you give them autonomy over what? Even if you say you give them all the power to manage their resources, they are too small to manage any resource. So there's a minimum size required to give meaning to that autonomy that we are talking about. The autonomy had meaning when we had the regions. The autonomy will still have meaning if you have these 6 geopolitical zones as the regions. If you are, as we go to many mini states, then it becomes less meaningful, this autonomy, because it becomes less practicable. And that is why we made this provision for possibilities of merger. For instance, the possibility is not only to merge, even before they merge, they can have what we call zonal commissions. The West can have a joint zonal commission, a joint commission between all the states in the western, all the western states, to jointly manage and develop their own resources. That's a joint commission, before merger. If they want, they can go all the way and merge. As I've said, subject to referendum by their citizens and approval by their houses of assembly. So these are all ways to effectively to manage more effectively this autonomy that we are all seeking to have. Now, of course, the Vice President says he believes in fiscal
Federalism.
Of course, that's part of what we recommended at the conference. So that at least that is a step forward. Fiscal federalism is something very, very significant. That fiscal federalism includes each states managing their own resources. So that all the federal government doesn't just collect all the oil revenue, all the oil resources, and then begin to have a monthly meeting where they distribute money to all the states. Let each state have the complete control over its own resources. That will give states sources of revenue for their own development. From these resources, they can pay tax. They can pay tax to the federal government. Every citizen has a responsibility to pay tax. States will also be required to pay tax from the resources they collect to the federal government, as we used to do immediately after independence. But at least they will be in charge of collecting their own resources. Now, imagine if the Niger Delta people were in charge of the oil production in the Niger Delta, and they were the ones collecting the revenue and paying tax to the federal government. Do you think they will be bombing their own oil pipelines? When they know that all this money comes to them, is their resources, they will not. But as far as they are concerned, this money is going to some strange person, far, far, far away. They, the owners of the oil, are being impoverished every day. The pollution is eating their crops, polluting their rivers, and so on.
Now, Senator
so this is why
Okuronnmu,
they cannot see it as their own.
Okay, if I may come in here. Now,
Yes.
in discussing the issue of restructuring, did you consider the multi-ethnic nature of Nigeria?
Of course.
And all of that. How do you restructure a multi-ethnic society like this?
In fact, as I explained earlier, the demand for more states in the north is moving towards giving each of the ethnic minorities almost its own state. Because the ethnic minorities, in fact, our founding fathers, Awolowo, Azikiwe, they were all in agreement that in fact what we needed in Nigeria was states along ethnic lines. Let each of the major ethnic groups have its own state. That is one thing on which they agreed. That doesn't we will still be one nation, but there will be greater harmony within that nation. Nobody will feel oppressed. So there's no harm. But let us not be afraid that ethnic groups will control their own union or control their own states. That is the way it is.
Okay.
Why do you think the Spanish in Spain there's agitation now for some sections of Spain that wants to break away from the main federal government? They are an ethnic group. They feel that they want to have their own autonomy.
All right, let's talk about the issue of rotational presidency, where some people feel that that will give some level of balance between all the regions and give them a sense of belonging, where the agitation, the bitter agitation will be reduced when you know that this region is supposed to produce the president, and then after that, the next region, after that, the next region, as the case may be. But some people have come to say that the concept of regional rotational presidency was a product of a political party in Nigeria, the immediate past political party in Nigeria that was in power. Now, how did you take that, certainly from your own opinion, as to how practicable is the issue of rotational presidency?
Well, I would say the rotational presidency is the next best thing. It is not ideal, but given the realities of Nigeria today, in fact, the National Conference approved this rotational presidency, rotating between the North and the South, and also among the various geopolitical zones. But it is not ideal. Ideally, if you have real restructuring, to the point where nobody cares about the ethnic identity of who is president, then we won't need to have this rotation. If everybody feels like a citizen of Nigeria that is taken care of adequately, no matter who is the president, that is the thing. You have to feel that the president cares for you, no matter whether it's an Ijaw man or a Fulani man or an Yoruba man. If you think that whoever is president will care for you equally, as in the same way we care for all Nigerians, then you won't care whether it is your man who is there or not.
Isn't that where, patriotism really should be what we should be fighting for, not necessarily restructuring?
You can't be patriotic when the system is not fair to you. How can you be patriotic to a system that is not fair to you? Tell me, you want to die for a country because you think that country is ready to go all the way to look after you, to protect your interests, to defend you. That is why people want to die for their country. But the country that when they make appointments, they always leave out your own people. When they make promotions, they leave out your own people. When they sack people, it's always your own people who are there sacked. And then you cannot die for that country.
Okay. Now, let's hear the Vice President on the issue of zoning here. We'd like to see and get perspective from different sides as far as this is concerned. Let's hear the Vice President on zoning.
As far as I'm concerned, whatever political arrangement the political parties make as to how they want the presidency to go should be left entirely to the parties, should be left entirely to political parties, and should be a political arrangement. But I don't believe that we should go and write into our constitution that there must be, that the presidency must go from zone to zone. I don't believe that that should be a constitutional issue. I think we should leave that to the parties themselves. If a party decides that we want zoning in 6 geopolitical zones, let them do so. But I don't think we should go and write that into a constitution. I don't think we should go and write that into a constitution. And I very strongly believe that the time will come when we will no longer be emphasizing geopolitical zones. And that's the kind of Nigeria I'd like to see. I'd like to see a Nigeria where we're all able to work together, where we're able to de-emphasize ethnicity, de-emphasize geopolitical zones. That's the kind of Nigeria that I'd like to see. I believe that sometimes, we preoccupy ourselves with some of these issues.
All right. You heard the Vice President. I know that many of the political parties already have that arrangement where they feel the office of the president should be zoned to a certain region of the country already.
They are reacting to the present realities. You cannot say you want something but not work towards it. If we have a vision of what we want, we cannot sit down and not work towards that vision and expect that God will bring that vision to be. No. When you have a vision, then you must begin to work to achieve that vision. As I have said, if every Nigerian knows that the president will take care of all Nigerians equally and live according to what President Buhari said, that it will belong to nobody, it belongs to nobody and it belongs to everybody. If he were to really mean his words and really operate like that, and we have 2 or 3 presidents operating like that, then nobody will care who is president. Nobody will care about zoning. But after saying so, what has he been doing? He has been acting as if to say it belongs only to the North. And the rest of us are strangers or conquered people. So in a situation like that, well, people cannot say it doesn't matter where the president comes from, because he's telling us that it matters.
Now, the issue of restructuring, one almost gets the impression that it seems that it is the cure-all to all of Nigeria's problem. But are we looking at the critical issue of bad leadership, which Nigeria unfortunately has experienced in a long time? Will a good leadership really solve the problem of all of these debates where you have different segments of this nation talking about marginalization, just like you said, and all the rest of them?
One of the things that has promoted bad leadership in Nigeria is this over centralization. You know, mystery likes company. When we had the Western region and we had a model of good governance, how government should be run, it will be difficult to have a man from the West come there and be a bad governor. Even up till now, compared to governors from other parts of the country, I think it is much difficult. It's more difficult for somebody from any of the Western states to really become very bad. As bad as they are, I think we still have relatively better governors in terms of the management of resources and so on than other parts of the country. This is because of the tradition that we have inherited from the time of the Action Group. Now, if you have a region where government is moving, there are examples every day, and the government by its actions show that it's a caring government and there is progress for everybody, then the people themselves will be the watchdog of any government that comes later that tries to depart from that norm. A norm will have been created, a norm will have been set. The people will already have their expectations from government, and any government that departs from that will be held accountable. But you see, because of the centralization, when all of us now go to say we want to be in the mainstream, and the mainstream is a dirty stream, so everybody becomes dirty. And that is what has happened to Nigeria. So even people from the West who had this wonderful example, this wonderful model, as soon as they got into the mainstream, now so their money is so cheap, people can get money so easily. They began to steal money too, things that were not happening in the Western region. That is what has happened.
All right, let's go further, because the point there is Nigerians hoped that at the end of the Constitutional Conference, there was going to be a mechanism for the implementation of the recommendation of that confab. Up till now, nothing has been done. But we heard at the time in the previous government when they talked about the possibility of a referendum to adopt the recommendation from the confab. What were the actual recommendations in the implementation of those recommendations, and what kind of challenges did it face?
You see, that conference faced enormous problems right from the time of my advisory committee going around to do the spade work for the. That conference faced enormous problems right from the time of my advisory committee going around to do the spade work for the conference itself. The country was polarized as to whether we should even have the conference or not. The South wanted the conference. The North, particularly the core North, did not want the conference. So that even within my advisory committee, it took a lot of diplomacy to get us to agree that we should have this conference. Because the representatives from the core North on that my committee came there to more or less scuttle the whole idea of a conference. But
what was their argument? What was their opinion as to why they stand against it?
Again, they say we already have a constitution. As far as they are concerned, we already have a constitution. There are modalities for amending the constitution. Leave everything to the National Assembly. That was the argument.
You're almost wondering, so what exactly is the way forward now? Should we even be looking at some kind of a referendum that can determine what the mind of Nigerians really is concerning whether or not to adopt the recommendations of this 2014 confab? That is, how educated really are Nigerians too on about the recommendations of this confab?
Well, we expect if the government wants to set about implementing the recommendations, the first thing they should do is to make the recommendations widely available to the masses so that the masses can possess these recommendations. The man on the street can buy maybe a very small pamphlet containing a summary of all the recommendations of the National Conference, so that almost like you buy your newspaper from the newspaper vendor, you can pick it up and read through it. So this is what the National Conference recommended. Then after everybody is aware of this, then maybe they can then put it into little packets, because if we say they should subject the whole thing to a referendum at once, people may like one section and not like another section. So if we now put them into little packages, and then put each package to referendum separately and see what the people like, whether they will support it or they don't support it, that would be the way to go. If, for instance, you want us to have zones as the new federating units, put that to a referendum. Let the Nigerians vote. Let them take it. Let them decide. If you think we should have state police, put that to a referendum. Let Nigerians decide on that. So we have a state. We have state police, and so on.
All right, but from this standpoint now, does it look like there'll be any of those implementation of any of the recommendations?
Buhari has told us he has put it in the archives. Is that not what he said? And that is what he said.
But of course, you have the National Assembly saying that
the Buhari said he has not even bothered to look at it. That he does not want even. He has not even asked to be briefed about it. That he has put it in the archives. That is consistent with his position even before the conference. And that is consistent with the position of his people, the North, even before the conference. They did not want this conference. They did everything to scuttle the conference, but they did not succeed. So, but now they think their man is in power. Now they can scuttle all the decisions.
Yeah, but the vice president supported some of the recommendations, and they said they will look into the issue to try to see which of the ones they can implement.
There is only one man in power in the presidential system, and that's the president. The president, it is what the president decides to do. That is what is going to be done.
Does it make any difference that the National Assembly is looking at some of those recommendations as a way forward? Will it help?
Well, the National Assembly may implement some of them, but maybe not to the full extent that the people want or that is desirable. And as I have said, always note that the National Assembly we have today is a skilled National Assembly. Skilled in the sense that if the North wants something from the National Assembly, they will get it. If the South wants something from the National Assembly, there's no, and the North doesn't want it, the South will not get it.
All right, Senator Femi Okuronnmu.
Are you listening to me?
No,
yes, we'll have to, unfortunately, time.
We don't have all the time right now.
I just want you to get that clear.
Time has caught up with us.
It's a skilled National Assembly.
Yes, thank you so much, Senator Femi Okuronnmu, President Advisory Council of the 2014 Confab. Thank you so much for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.